This is in relation to the controversy surrounding Stellar Blades Eve.
It's perfectly fine to have an animation style, especially in a game, but when you're appropriating someone else's image and then changing it, it becomes an issue.
And that means you're probably gay.
I totally agree.
People are going to be jacking it off to her. So what if somebody is jacking it off to her? They paid the money.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Over here we can see the ass cheeks, which is
penis, dicks, ass, titties.
And not flattering, I don't think, for a modern audience. In comparison to something like Forspoken.
Because mainstream outlets have often weaponized that against toxic fans.
You'd hope to see some progress. Guess it's a little disappointing.
Woke ideology under attack by a digital female that's fucking stacked.
Is a game so basic and aggressively shallow that it might be a scam?
도망쳐, 이브. 농약에 대한 설명이나 광고 주문이겠지만요.
I am Couch Coop. As that intro suggests, we've got quite a lot to cover. I'm a bit more gravelly than usual. Got a slight cold, but I am desperate to talk about Stellar Blade. I do have the original South Korean dialogue on with subtitles, much prefer it, not too sure how that dub is working with the facial animations, but I will always default to the native language Eastern video game. It just settles me into that immersion a lot more. Some dubs are absolutely amazing, Hi-Fi Rush being a good example, Sean, and visually Stellar Blade gives us 3 graphical options: resolution, quality, and a middle ground under the balanced title. Now that's where I sat for the entirety of my capture. I felt comfortable with it, the frames didn't drop, it was smooth, and we're dealing with a higher resolution than 1080, and that certainly pays off with some of the scenes within this video game. There is no ray tracing per se, but there's certainly a lot of modern techniques in here, and there's neons, run down looks to the hubs. It all feels quite natural and well put together. There are some low textures on some of the structures, considering the studio's heritage. Now let's talk about that very quickly. This up's previous game is something called Nikki, which plays like a hentai-ridden mobile phone loot box game. It's kind of horrendous, and I can understand skepticism from reviewers when first looking at this game, because its opening hour and a half is not layman when it comes to the model that it settles into. The last vocal soundbite on that intro is from a guy who is basically pitching that this game is a huge scam and the combat is scarce and nothing's really working and it's just a hodgepodge of different ideas. It is very far from that. You can see the vision and the ambition from the creatives within this game. It just stumbles a bit in areas because it's not sure where it's supposed to go. After that demo, it was so important that I explored some of the more in-depth combat mechanics with the buffs and adding different things to the moveset of the main character, and that has certainly been something I've been able to test with this full game. That demo is a bit like a first date. You really did not get a good taste of mid or late game mechanics within Stellar Blade. Just the use of the barrels is a little bit of meta I didn't spot first time round. And this footage is me without a few of the counter moves that you get given later on. You're sort of manually dealing with a shield bearer type enemy, but it is still extremely satisfying. The ebb and flow, the exchange, coming from somebody who thoroughly enjoys high-end ARPGs and Souls-likes, is kind of market leading and extremely current gen. Very few games look this good on a third-person ARPG level, and I put a vast amount of modern Souls-likes within that statement. Is it a Souls-like? That's kind of a conversation that is also out there. Through my eyes, the answer's a massive yes. It scores 2 out of the 3 major blocks that put a video game in the Souls-like sphere, and that would be a bonfire restart system. Enemies respawn when you sit down at your restart point, and they have to be reached in order to be activated. This is not a stage per stage continue now system. also goes for the health regen. You're not going to find a little nugget of green goodness on the ground to boost that bar. You have to take out what you're given, and if you run out of them, that's your own damn fault. Esters can be upgraded, like with all souls, but you get what you're given. There's no replenish natural regeneration. The other thing is its layout on the combat front and its meta with parrying and time parries, and also the button layout. Surprisingly enough, this is not an R1, R2 heavy and quick hit setup. You're using the face buttons, and that hasn't happened with a third-person hack and slash with me for a long time. Even Ubisoft moved over from the face buttons up to the shoulders when it came to implementing an attack move. So that's quite refreshing. It's also quite refreshing as it isn't all about that timed parry on L1. Circle gives you a get out of the way at the last minute dash, and if you time it within the ridiculously small window given, you get an opportunity for a counter attack. You go through this red mist, it looks absolutely amazing. The time slows down a little bit, and back to that previous video about bullet time and video games in general, it's great to see it implemented in a single player campaign. I worry that decent time slowdown mechanics are becoming a rarity, and this implements it perfectly, giving you empowering, amazing visuals and making you feel like you're genuinely having an impact on combat. There is a third method of counter. Some enemies will represent a blue circle, meaning they're going for a finisher move, and you can dart towards them. That's the difficult thing, is that you have to go straight against the enemy as opposed to ducking away to instigate a slight cutscene backstab move. It looks amazing, and you really have to watch out for it. It does keep you on your toes. When you first start playing this game, you will be a bit button bashy with it, but you've got to remember this isn't a cancel animation type setup. This is a bit more like Monster Hunter, where you have to watch the protagonist finish their swing before implementing another move, and you can queue everything up, time everything beautifully. What was that third Souls pillar that you didn't mention? That would be in relation to the story being completely incomprehensible and characters only giving you tiny nuggets as and when pushed 3 times in a row on the same button input. Thankfully, this one's a little bit more simple with its story setup. On the right hand side of the bottom of the screen, you can see like a 4-place cursor. That's where your really flashy, amazing special moves sit, and they're built up by taking a lot of parry. That guy that said this was a scam on that intro, sign me up, scam me away, give me the newsletter, I'll do monthly installments. If this is what scams look like on a video game front, holy crap. This is not a day before situation. This is a solid AAA beautiful video game, but it just has some major problems with direction. I think that's what it is, as the guy that put this together, the individual at the top, had a lot of ideas about what they wanted to put in, or they finished the game and thought, crikey, it's a little bit short, let's put some annoying as hell puzzles in. They certainly exceeded with the latter. Just referring to that previous bit of footage with me hanging around that pond, no wet look Eve, unfortunately. That onesie is kind of shiny anyway, but I was disappointed at not seeing any wet hair or cool sort of drip mechanics. You cannot have it all. But what this game does have all of is innovation on enemies, their attack patterns, their looks, their variants. They have stolen the show for me, and they've actually put out a making of just the enemy creatures video, which I'll link in the description. This is where this game comes into its own. My God, it is some of the best detail I've ever seen on stuff I'm attacking. There's also badass finishing poses and Eve just looking extremely anime at all times when finishing off a fight or even just traversing to another section of the game. This is a lot less gratuitous on the female body front and a lot more monster heavy than I could have possibly imagined. All that body controversy completely overshadowed what I think should be an award-winning level of creature design within Stellar Blade. That guy's circle finisher, particularly annoying because he goes for a forward grab, so you have to delay your dash into him. It's really satisfying when you navigate around it because the punish for getting grabbed and slammed is pretty difficult. I will push on that. This is not an easy game. This is all in medium, and sometimes that focus can cause issues when you're trying to use that dash from the blue circle move. It's all pretty crazy. But look at the way the light hits everything, the flash, the panache, the variants. One of my more favourite things, the standard enemies are called crickets. Then you get these ones called butcher crickets, which have got this amazing like skin on them. They're quicker, they just don't muck around, and you have to be very cautious. This is all about making a mistake or relaxing and then getting pushed back because you just weren't paying attention. Getting these with no damage is very satisfying. Should mention that this game's been out 3 months and it's had a lot of patches. We also have a boss challenge mode where it queues them all up for you on the main menu and you can go and fight all the bosses you've unlocked. A la Vanquish, it's very cool and wasn't there at the beginning. I can imagine if you finished this or gone on to New Game Plus, then it'd be very cool to visit some of those iconic boss battles. They are also promising a photo mode. Can you believe? Can you imagine how much I'm gagging for that? You can dupe the enemies to get in closer so you can have a good look at them. Again, this is where my jaw was just dropped. I was like, wow. You barely pay attention to these little things, but when they show how they're put together, the hairs on the legs and the constant movement, you're just like, there's effort here, huge effort. But let's talk about structure. This is what has upset, I think, a lot of the bigger name reviewers. It sort of moves the goalposts around about 3.5 hours in. You think you're playing a sort of slightly browsy-based, corridor-based, go to A to B, Souls-like, and then you're given this vast wasteland area, a load of NPCs with side quests, a travel mechanic where you can teleport in and out of the wasteland, and a whole bunch of stuff to do. That is a 6-hour section, and it feels a little bit like maybe something like Final Fantasy 13, where you've got a village to sort of work with and get friendly with everyone in order to move on to the next section. Whilst we're on this fight, the cherub look to the head of it, very Bayonetta with some of the enemy designs here, and also I'm seeing a lot of crucifixes and Christian iconography around, so there may be a deeper message with this game on that front. Didn't spot a lot of LGBTQ plus stickers slapped on everything in the home hub. Pulls out the core thing that you need for the upgrade. I didn't spot that until looking at the replay, and I just love the slide, sword in the ground. Every time there's a badass outro to the boss kills. Let's get back to this wasteland and this game model change. I wish the designers had the confidence to do this from the start of the game and maybe make this one of 3 larger biomes that you open up and explore kind of at your leisure. Semi-open world system. I love the idea of interacting with all the NPCs. They've got problems, people have been kidnapped, you sort of help out with the village, upgrade as you go. It very much works, but it just feels completely alien that you've come up to it against some of that previous gameplay. The whole crowd control thing becomes more apparent out here in the wastes, picking your battles. Also, it will spring them out of the ground. You'll think, oh, it's just a little grunt, and then 5 medium-sized enemies will pop up around you. using that specials bar over on the right with the big slashes that take out more than one enemy at a time, or even a forward projectile if you've got a few of them queued up next to each other. The choices are everywhere, including the choice of parry or dodge, and sometimes you'll just get a happy accident. Talking of that, you will default to having L1 at the ready for a big attack coming in. Now, I'll also have the circle button, which is that dodge option. If you push them both at the same time, you'll use one of the specials that are stored up on the right. Sometimes it just works in your favor, but you'll end up getting rid of a lot of hard work on an enemy that really doesn't need it because you're defaulting to pushing something whilst you're guarding. It's very difficult to just focus only on having L1 in. A little bit like the Sekiro system. There is a twangometer on the enemies. You'll see it under their health. They can only take a certain amount of rebounds. Eve has no stamina and no twangometer, so you can just go hell for leather, but just make sure you've got the timed parries lined up. Talking of lining things up and that game model conversation, it will just push you into a ridiculously difficult bit of platforming. Thankfully, it does lean on the restart and it will put you at the base of this tower, but lining up for that ladder took me ages. And when the combat is that good and you're doing stuff like this, you're kind of seething. I haven't even spoken about the gun and projectile weaponry on the enemies. This is where this game goes full Oat Studios, I'm going to say, with the design of some of the awesome looking robot, like rebel, rogue, crazy stuff that you've got coming your way. And they work together Halo style, they protect each other. You have to prioritize. I had to use some landmines and ordnance just to get past this dude further up. It kind of stretched me a little bit, but it was seriously cool. You almost get a sort of Borderlands-y feel with this open world section that you're given mid-game. There is a quest board, there's people asking for various side quests and jobs to be done, so you're taking time out to really explore all the checkpoints, and you can telephone through once you discovered a fast travel point, sort of get things going a lot quicker. At this point I'm really craving something well difficult, like a room full of 15 of them or something, or 3 boss battles in a row. I want something to stop me in my tracks, and sure enough I find a wave section where it's just this briefcase. You open it up and you're like, great, I've got rid of 4 of them, and it's like, no, that's 1 of 5 waves and it stops with a boss. I just cannot wait to see what's at the back end of that. The gun, after an update, now defaults to point at what you've got on focus. I think before it was just like a free-for-all and you had to navigate the cursor over to what you wanted to shoot. Let's say you've got that shotgun on and you've got something right in front of you that you're focused on. You can just whip to L2 and fire at it full on, point blank in the face, and move on to the next victim. It's got this great new flow. I imagine that update was very much welcomed. I never experienced the game without it. Might also remember Cherub Matey. He's also knocking around and up for a second fight. You can see he's got the wounds from your previous meeting and his moveset is upped ridiculously. That one I'm going to have to go back for. There has been some talk about its $70 or £60 price tag when you've got stuff like Helldivers 2 to £40 but no single player offline content. I think that price is okay. I say that in inverted commas. Obviously I'd love to see it retail at $50 and go out on one of the Sony subscription services. That's probably a very good area to go for if you want access to this game. The only trouble is you've probably got a bit of a weight on your hands. And lastly, I do want to talk about airborne combat, or Eve's jumping and in-air combat capabilities. They're kind of non-existent. And I've only just opened up the double jump. That was after the 10-hour mark, can you believe? I also want to talk about its Dead Space sci-fi section, which again stretches it too far. It's kind of not needed. It strips you of all your weaponry. You only have the gun, and it goes very dark and suspense ridden, and you get loads of ammunition, and it just turns into a third-person shooter. If they'd have just leveled things out a little bit with some of these crazy puzzles and differences in location and game model change, I think we would have seen a more consistent message, and I think we probably will with further updates or additions. Someone should have said to the head guy, this game is strong enough just on its combat, it doesn't need all these gimmicky location changes or puzzles thrown in. Look at something like Mortal Shell or even Remnant from the Ashes. They are really focused on what they're good at, and that is their combat model, and Stellar Blade I put in that bracket. Is Stellar Blade something I would recommend to my listeners or regulars? Well, you guys know exactly what you want when you see it, and if you're slightly interested in third-person ARPG hack and slashes, Devil May Cry, Elden Ring, you're in for a hell of a treat with this one. Stellar Blade is so much more than a woman jumping around in a leotard. It's a really good, modern, third-person ARPG / Souls-like, and it's got small pinches from other genres in it, which don't ruin things too much, but if you put that to the side and just focus on what it really wants to deliver, and that is absolutely epic 9th gen, even 10th gen looking in places, combat.
상황을 좀 살펴보고 공략하자.
Was of course Couch Coop, and thank you very much for giving me 20 minutes plus watch time. The next video is going to be a huge split screen AAA video game which hasn't been put under the microscope for near on 2 years. I will see you down there.
Titties.
도망쳐, 이브.